Hello everyone, and today I am going to be talking to you guys about the Celts of Iberia, preferably their arms and armor. Now you guys might wonder, what did the Celts of Iberia actually have for arms and armor? Did they wear anything at all? Did they just go around bare-butt naked? And did they just use sharp pointy sticks? Well, that type of idea that you guys might think about of people being barbaric things like this is actually all Romanized fiction. Meaning never even true, it's just propaganda bullcrap. Anyways, the Celts of Iberia had what you might call a variety of weapons and armor. Preferably later on, Rome would actually use. Now first let's start in the time of the Bronze Age. Now the Bronze Age Celt Iberians were new to the peninsula. And as well, if you guys are also wondering why this area is known as Iberia and where it is, this is modern-day Spain and Portugal. Now, the Celts of Iberia, as soon as they entered this new region, what they did is that they pretty much invaded another kingdoms, well, Neolithic kingdoms that were not used to the Bronze Age culture, in which the Celts of Iberia completely slaughtered or enslaved them. Now, if you guys want to learn anything about Celtic slavery, I will put it in a link below for you guys. Now, you guys might wonder, what did the Celts of Iberia use for Bronze Age armor? Well, Celt Iberians were not heavy combat warriors. These guys were of a light foot combat military. They were like skirmishing units. In fact, perfect with horse cavalry and including with chariots. But when it comes to foot combat, they would never, and I repeat, never actually use heavy armor. Their armor consisted of light, durable type armor that would pretty much last you your entire lifetime and be passed down from father to son. But pretty much the Celt Iberians during the time of the Bronze Age created a type of light, I guess you might say a mixture of wool and cotton type fabric. In fact, they even had somewhat of leather rawhide armor. In doing so, it wrapped the entire body, or most like the torso. Pretty much your back and your front, and including your shoulders, or sometimes just protected your kidney area. Kind of like what you've seen with my kidney belt. But now you guys also might wonder, why was this armor perfected in the Bronze Age? Well, Bronze Age weaponry wasn't the type of weapon that you mainly know to actually go for a rawhide shield. In fact, sometimes the Celts of Iberia even mixed a version of wicker and leather to better stop Bronze Age weaponry, in which completely worked. Now though, when it came to bronze casting though, the Celt Iberians created a type of disc-like shape, kind of like what you might call a type of body protection that protected both the back, the front, and including sometimes underneath both the armpits and including the shoulders. But the Celts Iberians actually did perfect it very well, actually, and later on versions of it were extremely impressive. Though Celt Iberian helmets are a rarity. In fact, only the noblest of them can actually afford them and actually use them. Which, I guess you might say, doesn't sound right, but technically this is, well, what it was. In which a lot of Celt Iberians would have actually fought without a helmet, which, to our standards, kind of sounds stupid, but it sounds a little lighter armor, if you ask me. But now, what else did they also use for armor? Well, that's the thing. Celt Iberians were of a light foot combat military, meaning they pretty much probably only protected their torso or their head. While, as well, they would have also created a type of groin protection known as a sciarca mordotis. Now, the sciarca mordotis was actually a type of scale armor that was first perfected in the Bronze Age, late Bronze Age more likely, in which protected the groin muscles from an oncoming thrust from a weapon or such. But the Celt Iberians even created a type of scale leather or something like that that actually perfected as well, in which the Celt Iberians were of a light, as I stated, foot combat military. Now, it's not stated that the Romans would have used much of this type of armor, but they would have only used a few for their early Republican military. But now, also, let's go into their weaponry of the Bronze Age. Now, Celt Iberian Bronze Age weaponry is kind of what you might call, not heavy weaponry. In fact, their heavy weaponry wasn't heavy at all. In fact, the so-called heavy term is actually what you might prefer of a long sword, but that was actually more preferred for their cavalry units. And even Celt Iberians actually rather prefer using javelins to using a longsword. In fact, when it came to even foot combat, they actually didn't use elongated spears that you would normally protect yourself with. They would actually use a type of short spear known as a javelin. And these little javelins were known to be thrown at a distance. In fact, these were normally called a soliferum. Too many terms. But that was in later on the Iron Age. Alright, pretty much though, the Bronze Age of the Celts actually in Iberia had many types of small, like swords, or daggers as some people pronounced them as. But these type of small swords were pretty much the early version of a gladius, if you kind of think of it. They looked like a gladius, but they weren't a gladius. Pretty much it was beautifully decorated to actually, well, match the Celtic standards of a type of Celtic short sword. In which, most of the time, the Celtic swords at this point were of a leaf shape. Now you guys might wonder, why a leaf shape? Well, that's the thing about the bronze casting. During the bronze casting, this would actually make making it in the form of a leaf shape would actually make the sword stronger, especially when you come down with a downward cut or an inner thrust. Now, in doing so, these weapons were extremely professional and as well could actually kill a man with, well, one hit. But pretty much though, the Celt Iberians used only pretty much this type of form in weaponry up until the Iron Age, which they then perfected 8 different forms of weapons, which they later on used. Other than that though, when it comes to armor, when they also had or another forms of arms, would also be their shields. Now their shields were not massive like other Celtic shields were. They weren't Romanized type massive shields, they weren't Gallic massive carrying heavy shields. These were light combat bucklers. In fact, these bucklers would somewhat be around in 24 diameter to sometimes 18 to sometimes 12 in diameter, in which these were perfect. Now, most of the time, though, they were made out of rawhide, as I stated before, or sometimes this made out of a light material of wood. Though they would always have a boss and a inner arm grip, kind of like a Viking shield, if you guys kind of think of it. And the Celts of Iberia would use this, like this type of buckler, to actually use it to full efficiency. Now, the thing about this is, the problem about the buckler, this type, well, this is probably kind of weird, but technically the only problem about it was that it kind of gave way to weather. In fact, if it rained, you pretty much had to, well, unwarp it soon after it stopped raining, because the rain would end up, well, seeping in through the leather and into the wicker, and pretty much you get the point. But yeah, now that's the Bronze Age. Let's go into the Iron Age. Now, the Iron Age Celt Iberians had what you might call a variety of armor and weaponry, and which would have actually been used by many cultures such as Rome, Carthage, Egypt, the Phoenicians, even the Greeks, and other Celtic tribes, and including later on in history much of the known world, especially in the medieval age. Now they still carried the scale-growing armor, but as well they were perfecting a new form of scale armor that actually covered the entire body, from knees to shoulders, and including covered the arms. But the Celt Iberians found it useless to actually cover the arms, so they kind of left it sleeveless instead of full sleeve. So pretty much, yeah, it was pretty much unstoppable, in which later on Rome and Greeks would have used it. But now, you guys also might state, okay, what other type of armor did they have? Well, the Celt Iberians were actually the one type of people who actually created a type of material armor that would later be used throughout the entire world. I'm talking about mail, or as a lot of people call it, chainmail. Celt Iberians were the ones who first perfected this form of armor, and in doing so, they created sleeveless chainmail, as I stated with the scale armor. But pretty much, though, they found it a little exposing, so they created a type of mantle device that would go over the shoulders, and would also perfect it in a form of a type of, what you might call a secondary type of armor. Just in case if a weapon got through the first layer, it could protect the second layer. And pretty much, though, it was extremely well built and could actually pretty much protect the entire body from the blows of another person. Say, like, for example, you were going to be attacked by, say, from a Roman, especially with his gladius. Well, here's the thing. The gladius can't go through mail. It was only later on versions that could. But the Celts of Gaul ended up adopting the Celt Iberian mail, ended up accidentally mistaking the armor until they perfected it only during the time of Julius Caesar. So, yeah. But now you guys might wonder also, well, what else did the Celt Iberians create? Well, they did make a type of helmet that would later on be used by the early Roman Republic, but then replaced by the Gallic type helmet. This was technically called a Mornaic helmet, if I remember correctly. Excuse my mispronunciation. But this type of helmet was perfect. It protected the back end of the neck very well, like probably around here, and as well had even cheek guards. They're very protected. In fact, technically, this thing actually protected your entire head, except for your facial detail. The Celt Iberians perfected this helmet first during the late Bronze Age and would later on use it throughout the Iron Age, in which was extremely impressive. Now, as I also stated before, the Celts of Iberia even created the type of spear or javelin that would be known as the Ciliferum, in which would later be known as the Roman Pilum, in which, yes, the Romans copied off of them. But as well, the Celts also created a type of weapon that would actually be perfect for cutting use, and as well a little bit of thrusting use, but also be perfect for their cavalry, and as well they would no longer need the elongated sword that pretty much everyone other, like say the Celts of Gaul, would have used. This sword was known as the falcata, or as the Greeks would call it, the kopis. Now, the Celts of Iberia used this type of weapon actually pretty well. Now, they did try and make it during the Bronze Age, which was a little flimsy at first, in which a lot of Celts didn't really like it, so they pretty much didn't make mass production of it until the Iron Age came. Now, you guys might wonder, why is the falcata made the way it is? Well, the reason is actually to give it a little more heft to it. In other words, say like you're getting hit by an axe, for example, but yet it's in the form of a sword. In fact, it was an early form of a machete, or technically, I guess you might call it a very dangerous hacking weapon that can easily cut you down with one chopping blow. In fact, this weapon was extremely dangerous, and even Romans adopted it, and including the Carthaginians, but as well Greeks, and some Persians, and Egyptians. The weapon was so massive production, it was actually really dangerous. Though another reason it was also made this way was also because of the fact, due to the material of iron they had in the Celt Iberian Peninsula, it's actually stated that there might have actually been a, what you might call a deformity with the iron, meaning that the iron wasn't very good. In fact, when many archaeologists look at early falcatas, they discover most of this type of material in Celt Iberia was so badly made that there was a reason why the Celt Iberians created their weaponry like this and that. Because pretty much there was a reason why the Fatzlothorn bent, meaning the iron was very poor. So the Celt Iberians had to reinforce it, which was very impressive by all standards. But upon making this type of weapon, the Celt Iberians even replaced the falcata with another type of weapon, known as the weapon that nearly conquered the entire world, so to speak. And this was known as the Celt Iberian gladius, or as a lot of you people know it as, the Roman gladius. In fact, the Celt Iberians, when they first created the gladius, it was both a chopper and a thrusting weapon. In fact, this thing was dangerous. In fact, one thrust with this weapon and you'd pretty much be dead instantly. Just like the falcata, it did have problems. So, yeah, you can see the reason why they got... Pretty much you can see the reason why they made it, though. They had to think up of something, so, yeah. But the Celt Iberians actually also had many forms of other arms and armor throughout the ages, of which what they were, it's hard to say, since when Rome came, most of the historical weaponry and armor might have been destroyed, or worse. But yeah. But as well, if you guys also probably might want to know what were the Celt Iberians' warfare was, well, that's simple. Celt Iberian warfare was a type of warfare that was kind of what you might call a skirmishing unit. In other words, technically it's like throw your javelins and such and no spears and just rush in head on, or technically it's like attack from one side, retreat, attack from one side, retreat. They did this with their cavalry, their infantry, and would later on do it against the Roman legions, but perfected it only when the Roman legions were at march. Anyways, guys, if you found this helpful, and which weapon you found the most coolest, and as well armor the most coolest, then let me know down in the comments below. And as well, if you guys want to know any other culture of their arms and armor and tactics, also let me know down in the comments below, and I will get to them very shortly. This has been Templar, and have a good day.